But we weren't the only crazy people who had packed up and left school and the home that we knew to travel the world. There were lots of other people out there like
Yeah.
us doing the same thing. And so I made the commitment to be able to do exciting things like meet people like you, be a guest on other podcasts so that I can share the message that there are more people with our particular brand of crazy out there. You just have to
I
find
really are.
your band. And it's marvelous when you do because you realize that you don't have to continue listening to all of the naysayers.
Hello and welcome to the Ronin Mindset Podcast. My name is Steve Didier, and this is a podcast for you if you are looking to become a digital nomad, move abroad, global citizen, something of that nature. This is a podcast where you're going to find all the information that you need to do, that you need to know to do just that. And my guest today, Karen Ricks, is going to be able to provide some really cool information, education for you after a decade of living in central Japan, where she and her husband had a baby and founded an international school. Karen sold all to pursue a once in a lifetime dream of going to cooking school in Italy. She and her family have been wandering wherever the wind blows since, sharing world schooling lessons from their global culinary adventures along the way. Karen doesn't just teach you how to play with your food, she also teaches you how to play in your body and play in your life. So, Karen Ricks, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. It's a pleasure.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this conversation in a big way since we chatted, and you got some really, really amazing stories that I think people are going to get a lot of information from. But let's start with where are you at right now?
So right now, my family and I are in Tbilisi, the capital of the Republic of Georgia, which is both Eastern European and also kind of Asian country.
Yeah, it's yeah, Western Asian, East, where that overlap is.
Exactly, exactly.
Now, Georgia is, I talked to a lot of different people, and Georgia is not one of the super popular, well-traveled places for digital nomads and expat. What brought you there?
Curiosity, honestly. It was one of the places that once we landed in Eastern Europe, because we've spent lots of time in and out of Albania, which again, similarly, not a lot of people have it on their radar. But we were like, then we're in the neighborhood and we're like, what else is not too far away?
Yeah,
And Georgia was one of the places that popped up on our radar. So we'd been thinking about it, considering it, reconsidering it for a while, and just recently decided, nah, let's go check it out. So here we are.
love it. Love it. How long have you been there?
Just a couple weeks now. So because I call our sort of travel slow matting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as long as we've been traveling, we tend to stay in a place for no less than a month. Typically, that's on the short end of side for us here.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're
Yeah.
just kind of getting our feet underneath us here, and especially here in Georgia because of the fact that the Georgian language is so drastically different from anything else that we have studied. The syllabary, the script is absolutely gorgeous, but it looks like a bunch of beautiful curly cues. So, landing in a place once again where we're all completely illiterate is an adventure in and of itself.
Yeah. No, it really is, especially when you go someplace and the writing's in a script that's completely different. It's not even anything you recognize. Like if you're in the
Not at all.
like in the Arab countries or like Cambodia, Thailand, it's just
Yeah,
completely foreign.
yeah.
I love it.
I do
I
too.
love it.
It's an exciting part of the adventure and a part of our continued learning.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any plans for any definite exit plans? You're just going to be there until you feel like going someplace else.
We plan to be here actually for the season, and then we have our
Okay.
eyes returning to Albania, actually.
Back to Albania.
Yes, it's become
Okay.
a really comfortable kind of home base in Eastern Europe. We've had an opportunity to explore all of the surrounding countries too, from Greece in the south all the way up and around to Montenegro in the north. And there's still so much to learn and explore there too. So yeah, we're gonna head back and continue to bounce around from there.
Cool. Do you have a like a residency anywhere
No,
or
we're
other
just
citizenships or anything? Okay.
perpetual tourists, but
Yeah.
Albania is one of those places that makes it administratively easy for us with our little blue passport. So it's one of the reasons that we keep returning.
Okay. So you're getting kind of a sort of a home base sort of vibe there in Albania then.
It kind of feels that way. Yeah. Just not
You know,
something I
there's
ever would
some
have imagined, especially early on in
no,
our travels when, I could barely have located Albania on a map before we actually went there.
right. Well, and the only reason I really know anything about Georgia is because I'm a big fight fan, UFC, and two of the champions right now are actually from
Sure.
Georgia.
Yes, part of the
So yeah.
attraction here for my husband, who has also studied mixed martial arts, is the powerlifting culture too. My husband and my son are really into heavy lifting, and that's huge here in Georgia as well. So
Yeah,
excited for
anything in
us to
Eastern
be able to
European strength
explore
sports.
so much. Yeah,
Yeah,
all of the super strength sports.
huge there, huge. Yeah, I know a lot of, I don't know much about Albania and Georgia, but I know Montenegro is a great place for expats to get citizenship by investment,
Okay.
and it's very easy to go. I have a friend of mine who has a condo there. She kind of bases out of there, but it
Mhm.
helps her with her different tax structures
Sure,
and
sure.
so. Yeah, when you start getting into that, that opens up a whole different way of looking at countries.
Absolutely. Like I said, the administrative ease with which you can move as a tourist in certain places is one of the things that I encourage people to check out, depending on whatever passport they might hold. But as you mentioned, property ownership is another one of those things. And that actually came up very early on in our time in Japan because of the fact that we'd made friends from Australia who purchased property in Japan. And this is a huge, like, growing thing with the abandoned homes market in the country. It's
I've
really
heard a lot
easy.
about that in Japan recently.
Yes, so much. It's very easy for people who are not Japanese or of Japanese descent or residents or citizens to be able to purchase property, but that does not give you an automatic path to citizenship or residency or any of that. So it's a really important thing for people to consider.
Okay, so what is the, because I've heard a lot about that recently, especially in Japan, with
Mhm,
buying, there's like
mhm.
abandoned houses and you can
Yeah.
buy them for very, very cheap.
Yes.
But I also understand, like just like you said, you don't get any sort of residency with that purchase. You don't get
Not
any
at
of
all.
citizenship, obviously. What
No.
is their what is their end game when targeting foreigners to invest in properties like that if they won't give them some sort of residency?
So just like a lot of the things that people have heard about, the €1 homes in places like Italy, for example, there are a lot of rural areas where the population is not only dwindling, but significantly older. And so the homes are abandoned because they have been owned by older family members, typically who have passed away. If there is extended family, they're likely in some of the other major cities and don't have the resources or the desire to keep up a property in a place that's so far away. So, one of the reasons that many of the homes are so inexpensive is because they're not necessarily super easily accessible. They may have been abandoned not just, in the short term, but for years even. And so they may need major, major remodeling. But
Okay.
the idea is for them just not to continue to rot and fall into the ground, but
Yeah, yeah.
to, have somebody who wants to love them, take care of them, become a part of the community in which they exist. And that's really huge culturally in Japan, the connectivity of community. So I really encourage people who might be interested to really understand what it is they're looking for in a Japanese home. If it's just like a vacation place, something that they want to renovate to flip or rent out for rental income, which is not to say that there aren't properties that might not fall into those categories because there absolutely are. But they have to do their research very carefully and consider all of the aspects of what home ownership in Japan would be.
Right. And you do get full ownership as a foreigner,
Yeah,
correct? Not like
yeah,
some sort of leasehold or something like that. Okay.
no,
Okay. Yeah, I know I haven't been to Japan. It's very, very high on my list. It's coming up this year. But I also understand, and I've talked to a lot of people who have spent a decent amount of time there. And I know typically Japanese culture is kind of exclusionary to
absolutely.
foreigners.
Yeah.
Not that they're not friendly, but it's very tough to integrate on any sort of meaningful level in many cases. So, what
Yeah.
was your experience with that? Because you spent 10 years, correct?
We did, yes. And that was completely unexpected, unanticipated, not planned at all. In fact, my husband and I originally left with a 1 year plan to return to our quote unquote normal lives back in the US. And we just ended up enjoying ourselves so much and learning so much. And as I said, really becoming a part of the community in which we lived. And that was the draw for us to continue to stay there, to expand our family there, to build our school there. It was really all about community. And I
Okay.
can really kind of separate our time in Japan into two distinct parts. The part where, it was just the sort of foreign tourist on the outer fringes,
Yeah.
participating in this and that activity and learning about Japan and the Japanese culture, and the part where I really dug in, began to learn the language, really deepened friendships with my non-English speaking, especially Japanese
Yeah.
friends within the community. And when we, it's funny because it was a major shift that actually came on the heels of a major global event. My family and I were in Japan during the massive earthquake and tsunami back in 2011.
Oh,
That was just a few
okay.
months after our son was born. And it was literally 1 month to the day before we opened our school. And
Oh,
it
wow.
was as big a declaration of our intent to stay and remain a part of the community that we had been building, as so many other foreign residents were fleeing the country. So
Yeah.
again, there was a very distinct like before and after sort of period to our time in Japan. And that commitment that we
Right.
made to build our business, to expand our family, to cement ourselves as members of the community was a distinct turning point in our time living there.
Yeah. Well, with your ability and your integrating into the culture, a lot of that was due to the school project, right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. It
Okay.
was the school, not just the school that we built, but even the schools where my husband was teaching at the time. He had taught in both public and private schools within the community, as well as a local conversation school, where
Okay.
the teaching of English as a second or foreign language is a whole separate industry outside of the regular schools in which children also study the English language. And
Okay.
my integration within the local community, teaching in local community centers, as well as the church where we were members. So it was integration in the community with several different sort of limbs and different aspects of our daily
Right.
life and work and interactions.
Okay. Well, you kind of answered a little bit of my next question because I was thinking if you guys had the school project,
Mhm,
that is kind of a unique but very specific way to integrate into the Japanese culture.
mhm.
And I was going to ask kind of a follow-up, like for somebody who doesn't have that, but wanted to move and live there and kind of integrate in the culture, how would you best go about that?
So, one of the things that I always recommend is for people to explore whatever it is that interests them. My husband, I mentioned the mixed martial arts, the heavy lifting. He's also really into judo. And so my husband was a part of the judo community within our local community. He trained with local law enforcement officers. He won the city tournament as a black belt. And this was after earning his black belt in the United States and then starting again as a white belt from scratch. So like completely
Yeah.
from the
So
beginning.
that
It
doesn't
was
transfer.
not in the least, not at all. No. But again, it was something that he was really passionate about. And so he went in with that open learner's mindset and became a
Yeah.
part of that community. And it was the same for me. Actually, I made some friends in the neighborhood who introduced me to other friends. And as we were hanging out and chit-chatting, we recognized that we were both Christians. And so this woman invited me to church. And when I became a member of the church, I was invited to expand and do other things. And so I taught Sunday school. I conducted rehearsals with we built a choir within our church community. We did annual charity concert, I mean, all sorts of things. But singing is one of those things that I just always love to do. And I was invited to do that within our local community and to share. And so there was this wonderful cultural exchange. I met people who wanted to welcome me into the community, help me to learn the language and get to know them. And I was also asked to teach something that I know something about. So it worked out really well all around.
Right. One really does need to become functional in a language to truly integrate, though, correct?
It's really, really helpful. I won't say that it's impossible if English is your native language because there are so many people all over the world who are doing everything that they can to learn English. Sometimes it's with a lot of success, sometimes a little bit less than. One of the reasons that our school was so popular was because of the desire that parents had for their children to come to us and learn and study in an immersive environment. And that can be challenging. So, in some ways, our school could be an English bubble. And I know people, especially people who go to teach English in other parts of the world, that can fall into the trap of being in a linguistic or cultural bubble because of that.
Hmm.
But it
Yeah.
makes such a huge difference when you learn the local language because it opens up so many deeper aspects of the interpersonal interactions, the history, the culture, all of the learning. It's all on a much deeper level.
Yeah, for sure. Like I took 3 weeks of Japanese, then I quit. I was like, that's it. But I do have a basic, you know, I like to say I'm almost conversational in Spanish. So that's
Mhm.
helped me when I travel Latin American countries, because I'm not going to discuss anything too complex or in depth, but I can get by, you know.
I understand completely.
That's a really couple really good insights on people looking to integrate into, communities where they end up moving abroad, because I have kind of a similar sort of thing as your husband. I have trained and fought Muay Thai since
Uh-huh.
1997. So, and I do jujitsu, MMA, so a wide variety of things. And any place I go, no matter what country, you can always find a
Yes.
Muay Thai gym or a
Yes.
jujitsu gym, and you've got
Yes.
automatic common ground with
Yes.
for me, with those guys, you know what I mean?
Mhm. It helps so much to dive into something that you're already familiar with, that you have a general basis of understanding, because it helps you to connect with the local language in a way that's automatically more meaningful to you.
Yeah,
Joining churches and participating in worship services around the world automatically opened doors, whether we were in
yeah,
Mexico or in Italy or even in Australia, where we speak English, but the English isn't necessarily the same. But
yeah. There's some differences.
some differences, yes. But there is a common understanding when you
Yeah,
have that foundational basis. And so I have, like recently, I jumped back into some ice skating, which is something else
ice
that I've
skating.
done in different places around the world. And I have a few words and phrases in Georgian now under my belt. And just like I have a few words and phrases in Russian, which I brushed up on using Duolingo before we came here because I knew it was also a language commonly spoken and written here in Georgia.
Hmm.
But I don't
Yeah.
speak Russian or Georgian, and yet I was able to jump out onto the ice and understand what was happening and be able to communicate with some very basic things, even with the coaches that didn't speak any English, because we automatically spoke the common language of skating.
No, that's fascinating. That is really good information for people because a lot of people that I talk to, they're a lot of them are concerned about how they might meet people, make
Mhm.
friends, integrate into the culture. That's a real thing. And I never really thought about it much when I first started traveling. I just would end up at Muay Thai gyms and make friends. So I didn't put much thought into it. But those kind of activities, something that you're passionate about, something where you can plug into a group
Mhm.
and you can start building your language skills
Yeah.
around that activity as well.
Absolutely. My Japanese friends really laughed in the latter years as many of the individuals that I'd met in the first year or two came back into regular meetings again as we were winding down things at our school, getting ready to leave, even when we returned to Japan a year later, because many of them hadn't heard me communicating in Japanese much. But
Mm,
they were suddenly really shocked to hear me speaking Japanese. And when they were asking, well, but you've been teaching English, how are you learning all this Japanese? And I was reading my Bible in Japanese, or I
ah,
was communicating in our cooking circles with people who were teaching me the Japanese dishes I wanted to learn in Japanese.
yeah.
And we were having really organic conversations. And I was getting the kind of linguistic input that was meaningful, that was going to be memorable to me because we were doing things that I love to do. And it wasn't the kinds of boring language lessons that put me to sleep in high school, where we were
Yeah.
studying the grammar and breaking down the verb conjugations. And I mean, all of that stuff I recognize. Some people learn really well that way. That's not me at all. But knowing how I learned best and diving in to do those things, it makes all the difference. And it's such a huge part of our world schooling adventures. I can't imagine trying to learn any other way.
Oh, it was the same for me too. Like when I was coaching Muay Thai for a little bit in Mexico, just helping out, and that expanded my because I didn't speak much Spanish at all. I was in the process of learning.
Sure, sure.
So yeah, there wasn't any official verb conjugation or anything like that, but I learned all sorts of stuff
Yeah,
that applied to Muay Thai. It was something I was passionate about, something my students, they all spoke, there were a couple that had some decent English, but most of them all were, Spanish speakers.
yeah,
But it was kind of funny. I'm like, okay, patata, okay, kick, I got it, got it.
yeah,
It just programs in there easy.
exactly.
So yeah, yeah, that's a really both good way to integrate and learn the
It's one
language.
of the ways that I often encourage people who insist that they're not good at language learning, because my Japanese language skills consisted of basic greetings and being able to ask like what's this and where's the restroom and maybe order a drink, which I don't even drink. So you know moving into Japanese culture, that was a whole other aspect of learning. But
Yeah.
my husband and I found some, language learning CDs using the Pimsleur method, and we listened to those in the car. And that was the extent of our Japanese learning before we actually landed in Japan. And
Mm,
living in the country, interacting with people on a regular basis was 10,000 times more effective for me personally in learning the language than all of the studying I could have done out of a book for years. And I saw the same
right.
kinds of things with people who had been interested in the culture, had been studying the language, like in school or something, for years. Their actual ability to communicate with other people wasn't necessarily at the same level as me after being in town for a month. because we were using the language differently. Studying it
Right.
and breaking down the grammar in a textbook is a very different mental and emotional investment
Yeah.
and exercise in communication than actually, like being in the grocery store and trying to find what you're looking for and communicating with a person to find and purchase what you need so that you can eat that day.
Exactly. For me, I need both.
Mhm.
Because I was military and I was, combat arms artillery. So my hearing got damaged. So
Yeah.
I I don't just hang out and hear and just pick it up.
Hmm. Hmm.
'Cause especially when the different tonalities and stuff, some languages
Oh,
are
yes.
very,
Tonal languages are another level.
yeah, it's a whole different thing. Like Thai drives me nuts, Thai language. I was trying to learn some and there are like 8 different ways to say nah. And I'm like, they're all completely different.
Yes.
But so with me, it helped if I could do some structured learning in a classroom.
Hmm.
And then once I understood, like for example, in Spanish, conjugating verbs in the present tense,
Hmm.
once I understood the concept, I learned words. Okay, this is how you, then I started being able to pick them out in conversation. Then I
Yes.
would use them. Then it really accelerated.
And that's
So
why the immersive process can be so very helpful to on the ground learning because
yeah,
it's not just the dry classroom lectures and studying and doing your homework, but you are able to apply what you're learning
yep,
immediately and get immediate feedback about whether or not you did correctly understand what you were studying or not.
exactly. In real life, like the minute you leave the
Yes.
classroom, you can go somewhere and try it. Somebody in real life.
Exactly. And I do this all the time in another way that I found really expands not only the neuroplasticity, but spatial awareness. And that's with maps. Because, okay, I'm one of these weird Luddites. I don't have a phone. So I'm out wandering around without, GPS or Google Translate or anything like that at my fingertips. I look at maps when I'm at home on my laptop, and then I shut that down and I walk out the door, and then I just go wandering around. And so I'm out learning as I go, creating the spatial map based on what I see, walking the streets, seeing how things go by, looking for landmarks. And then when I return and I can come back and study the map again, then I can overlay what I know, what I experienced, what I walked with my feet, and be able to
Yep.
have the map that I'm looking at make so much more sense. And it's a great way to just get to know a new neighborhood like I have been here in Tbilisi. I got a Metro card and I go out and hop on a random bus and see where it goes. And then when I make my way home, which has on occasion taken a few more hours than I anticipated because I hopped on the wrong bus or misremembered the directions that I was, whatever the case might be, or even had a bus breakdown one time. But then when I get back, all of a sudden, I have such a greater awareness and understanding of where I am and how I'm moving in and around town. And it's a remarkable way to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Because I'll just go out and do the same thing. I do have a phone, but I'll just go out and wander. And I figure that's just the best way to, you see, if you just stick to oh, I'm gonna go to this tourist attraction or this or that or whatever, you don't really get a sense of
No.
it.
And you don't get an
And
opportunity to discover things that
yeah,
maybe aren't even pinned on the map anyway.
right, right, exactly. And you tie that in like I'm with Spanish, I am fluent in food,
Yeah, yes.
but I got that way because I love to eat and I
Mhm.
love to try different cuisines and everything like that. So I just forced myself. And there are very few things, if I'm in a restaurant, there are very few things you're going to trip me up on Spanish in a
Mhm.
restaurant.
Yes, yes.
But as soon as the conversation veers someplace else, I'm probably going to stumble. But my
I
girlfriend is
amaze
like,
people with my vast, expansive knowledge of food in languages that I don't actually speak.
I know my girlfriend laughs at me because when we're in a restaurant, I'm just having conversations with the waiter or waitress,
Mhm.
and she's like, In this environment, you're like fluent. What's wrong with you? Outside, I'm struggling. I'm like,
Yes. And it's
but
okay because that's another one of those expectations that schoolishness has really kind of drummed into our brains, that everything is supposed to be at an even level. And that's just not the way that our brains work. That's not the way life works. But when we find something that we're really passionate about, we can dive deeply into it. And you cannot stop the learning because we're
no,
following that natural curiosity, the inquisitiveness with which we're born.
yep.
And it's absolutely unstoppable.
Almost like a little kid experiencing the world for the first time and learning the different words. And
Exactly.
that's what I feel like. Well,
Yes.
speaking of food, let's talk about that. You are a chef
Mhm.
and a foodie and everything else. But you went to Italy
Yes.
to enroll in culinary
So
school?
while we were still in Japan, I got this once in a lifetime invitation to join this cohort of cooking professionals in Sicily. And I was like, how can I pass this up? So
Oh,
had a conversation with the family and we're like, yeah, this is the sort of thing we really want to jump on. So we sold it all and packed our bags and left after a decade in Japan. And we moved to Italy. And it was, I sometimes still don't even have the words to describe some of the most memorable meals I have had in my entire life. We joked that it wasn't even farm to table, but arm to table because there were literally things growing like right outside the window of the kitchen
yeah.
where we were cooking that were incorporated into our meals on a daily basis. It was the most marvelous sensorial experience imaginable. And it was a reminder that food and cooking was something that I would be eternally passionate about. And that's what I needed to continue studying.
Well, food is like the universal way to connect with people. I don't care what culture you're from,
Yeah.
people can connect over food. I think, honestly, I was a big fan of Anthony Bourdain, rest in peace. And he really emphasized that because you can bond with people over the local dishes, the local beers, drinks. It's such a powerful way to connect with people that even if you can't speak the
Yes.
language.
Yes, exactly. And I have made deep and lasting friendships with people that, again, barely shared much of a common vocabulary, but because it was shared over a meal, we bonded in ways that I would not have imagined possible without that lived
Yeah.
experience.
Yep. I've had the same experience, and it's strange how powerful that is.
It really, really
It really
is.
is.
But when you look at how much food is integrated. It's a part of the geography in which we live. It's like literally a part of the landscape, but it's also a means of linguistic and cultural transmission. But even more than that, it engages every single one of our senses. So we get to hear it and see it and smell it and feel it and taste it. And all of those things cement those experiences deeper than just our brain or our taste
Yeah.
buds, but deep within our souls. I truly, truly
Yes.
believe that.
Oh, I'm 100% on board with that. But I love food too. So, I don't know. Maybe
Yes,
there are
yes.
people out there who don't like food. I'm sorry if
As
that's
my
the
dad
case.
used to say, that they're probably doing it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter what area of the world. I like cuisines from all different countries, but Italy is known for their food, for their flavors, for their attention to the the nuances in the cooking. And you got to experience that in a really, really deep and profound way, huh?
I've lived it in, yes, the deepest and most beautiful ways. But even before getting to Italy, like it was a core part of what we did in our school. We weren't just, having the children at school every day with them, brown bagging their lunches, but we prepared foods. We cooked with the children daily, even making lunch, making snacks. We had pop-up restaurant events and cooking workshops on the weekends. We made and prepared all manner of international foods that we shared within our Japanese community at cultural events and festivals within the community. And so it was always a part of the learning, and it was part of how we made the leap so organically into becoming the digital nomad that I am now, which I, again, wouldn't have thought was possible before actually doing it because I spent, more than 15 years teaching in a classroom setting within four walls. But
Right.
this concept of world schooling and making the leap as we did from our brick and mortar school in Japan to Italy and working to stay connected with the people that we knew from the US before we moved, with our friends and community members in Japan when we picked up and moved to Italy. It was something that I didn't realize would be possible to maintain those kind of deep and abiding friendships at such a distance until we did it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I'm so super thankful for the technology that we have at our fingertips because we get to continually share our experiences, whether or not we're in the same geographic location. And that is just a modern marvel.
It really is. It's fascinating because people who don't travel have trouble understanding how you can make, create, and maintain
Mhm,
such strong friendships,
mhm, mhm.
even though you are in vastly different parts of the globe. And
Yes.
that's something that I have found absolutely fascinating, but it's so much easier with the technology, whether it's Facebook or WhatsApp or any number of the communication platforms, but you can stay in
All
touch
the
with
things.
people. And,
Yeah.
I've made some of my best friends traveling
Mhm.
around the world. I've got
Yes.
friends in, I'm sure you do too. I've got friends in so many countries right now that there's probably 30, 40 countries I can just shoot somebody a text and shoot there and get a local treatment. And, you know,
Exactly. And that's part of what makes our continued travels even more exciting. Because when we first made the leap, it was we need to go to this specific place so that we can connect with this specific experience. And now it's more about, well, who do we know who might not even be in this specific location, but who has lived there or who knows somebody who can connect us with or make some suggestions about things that we might like to do, places we might like to go, people on the ground with whom we should connect so that we can enjoy our time living there. And again, I wouldn't have thought
exactly.
that it was possible to make the leap into a place where, again, we don't speak word one of the language, can't read, write, communicate really with anybody. And yet we can pack up and move and be like, we'll figure it out.
Yep. Well, I mean, just like this conversation, if I end up in Albania or Georgia anytime in the near future, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm shooting you a message
Absolutely, please
and
do.
get the load up. Yeah. And it's fascinating because I've met a lot of people that in person that I only knew on social media,
Yeah.
but ended up being in the same country or the same city and like, hey,
Huh?
let's grab a coffee or whatever. I absolutely
Absolutely.
love it because you have common ground,
Yes.
instant common ground, no matter where you're from, no matter what country you're from, you have instant common ground with other people who travel. It's like a global community.
It really, really is. And I get excited sharing the aspects of community as we travel with other people who might look like me but don't see a lot of representation for people who look like us in the travel space because we are out here. It does happen. And I have a chance to meet and connect with people online first, and then we deepen the relationships when we finally get to meet in person. And sometimes that might not even happen for months or even years after we
Yes.
first connect. I was really excited to see that you had my friend Lainey on your podcast
Yes.
a while back.
Yeah.
And Lainey and I worked together for years online. She was the one who introduced me and my family to this concept of world schooling, which for us
Mhm.
is literally learning from everywhere we go, everyone we meet,
Yep.
and every activity in which we're involved. And as I was learning about it, I realized, well, I've been doing this my whole life, and I had never heard that particular terminology for it. But
Right.
as I dug deeper online, when we were already into our travels, I discovered that there was this whole massive community of world schoolers, and their journeys
Mhm.
might not look exactly like my family's journey, but they were all over the world. There were other families that we could encounter who were sharing this common desire to
Yep.
educate themselves, their children, in what we might consider unconventional ways. But we weren't the only
Yeah.
crazy people who had packed up and left school and the home that we knew to travel the world. There were lots of other people out there like
Yeah.
us doing the same thing. And so I made the commitment to be able to do exciting things like meet people like you, be a guest on other podcasts so that I can share the message that there are more people with our particular brand of crazy out there. You just have to find
It really
your
is.
band. And it's marvelous when you do because you realize that you don't have to continue listening to all of the naysayers who, might couch it in love and concern for your well-being. It might be from, well-meaning friends or family members who are really expressing their fear at the
Yep.
unknown that you might be
Yeah.
launching yourself into. But when you know that this is something that's right for you, and you have the opportunity to surround yourself with community that encourages and supports you because they're already doing it too, it makes making the leap so much easier and more exciting.
So much. Yes, yes. And I think if that's a really important piece of information for people to understand who are thinking of making that leap, because there are a bunch of us out there,
Yes.
and your vibe will attract your tribe, and
Yes.
you're going to meet good people, and obviously you're going to meet people you don't vibe with, but that's okay. There's a lot of people out there. Like, where are you from originally?
So I grew up in San Diego, California.
Okay,
So,
okay,
yes, and my husband and I actually lived in a border town too when we were first married. We lived all over the US, but San Diego
okay.
will forever be my hometown.
That's your hometown. Yep. Yeah. And it's funny because I grew up in Minnesota, and I left Minnesota when I was 17. I was like, man, this is too cold. I got to get out. And ended up, I was in the military and bounced around, but ended up in Las Vegas for a big chunk of time. But when you get out there, you realize how small the world really is.
Mhm.
And like you said, you meet your people.
You
And it
absolutely do.
doesn't, and it's fascinating to me because you can have these amazing bonds with people
Mhm.
that are from completely different backgrounds, completely different lifestyles, and but like I said before, you have that bond right away.
Mhm.
It's a
There,
fascinating thing to me.
there are people in our lives right now that, if not for these nomadic world schooling adventures, I would never have had the pleasure of meeting. And some of these people are, closer than my own family now, people who
Yeah.
have, hopped on a plane to come and, meet me in another country just
Yep.
because they felt like it, or people who are willing to hop on a call day or night, no matter
Yeah.
the time difference or the hour, because they
Yep.
love and support us and want to be there for us, whatever happens to be going on in
Yep.
our lives. And it is a
Exactly.
truly, truly beautiful thing to discover that kind of community. And I have found
It
that
really is.
in the world schooling community, I found that in foodie communities, I found that in our church communities, all of our family members have found that in different sporting communities. I've
Yeah.
found it within the Black community, and not just Black Americans, even. But I had the most amazing conversation on a street corner here in Tbilisi with a South African woman the other day, just because we were walking down the street and she had on the most gorgeous earrings. I knew immediately from her earrings that she was from South Africa. Haven't even been to South Africa yet. But, like we're gonna get together and have, coffee in a local cafe or something next week. And I'm gonna get to learn more about her travels and she from mine. And who knows where we may end up next. But it's the most amazing thing to be able to make new friends in ways that I laugh because people had told me that it was impossible, even irresponsible for me to take my child out of school because he would never be able to form long-term friendships. That's simply not true.
I hear that a lot too. Like that's the one of the biggest reasons that she'll get from people is like, oh, we can't move abroad. We can't do that until our kids are grown out of the house. Like, no, you should do it with your children because there's no better way for them to
Uh,
learn about the world than going and seeing it.
exactly.
Experiencing the different cultures,
Exactly.
experiencing the people, experiencing all the different things. That
Mhm.
that to me is better education than any school could ever provide, ever.
Absolutely. Because there are so many things that there simply isn't time or priority for within the four walls of a traditional classroom. And again, having been a classroom teacher for as many years as I have, so many people thought I must have lost my ever loving mind to take my child out of that environment, to shut down the business that we were running in order to live this life. But I know that we are living the kind of example that we want our child to learn from. So many parents tell their children,
Yeah.
you can go wherever you want, you can do whatever you want to do, you can be who you want to be, but only after you go to school and sit down and be quiet and listen to what the teacher has to say
Yeah.
and, do all of these other things first. And when you stop to actually take a look at what is prioritized in that school environment, you realize it's all really arbitrary. Who
Yeah.
decides that, you know, calculus needs to come after geometry, after algebra in this specific order, and only for adolescents in this specific age group, and they all should be doing the same
Yeah.
thing at the same time? Where else in life does that actually happen? It doesn't.
No,
But
it doesn't.
when you have the opportunity to really dive deeply into what you're actually interested in learning, then you start to question all of the things that would make you wonder why someone else's priorities should take precedence over yours and what it is you're
Exactly.
interested in learning, what you're fascinated to learn about. Because the learning curve is completely exponential then. It doesn't have to be this arithmetic progression that doesn't happen anywhere else in life.
Yeah. And I mean, I've got a lot of problems personally with the modern school system. It is archaic. It was industrial revolution. It was to more programmed to people to be good workers, not to
Yes.
learn. That's, my opinion. But, I think like when I was in school, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do in life. But I knew for 100% fact that whatever I was doing in life was not going to involve advanced algebra, calculus, statistics, and I'm like, I'm in those classes. I'm like, I just don't care. Like, we need
No.
to learn this. I'm like, why?
Why? Exactly.
Why? I
And
don't care. I'm never
parenthood,
going to use this.
no. And parenthood was one of those things that really changed my mindset about that question, why?
Yeah,
Asking that question. And not just once or twice, but 3, 6, 12 times to really dig deep into the real answer. Because more often than not, in my experience, the answer is because I said so, because that's the way we've always done it, because that's the way I learned and I don't know any other way. And it doesn't necessarily
yeah,
make it the only way, the right way, even the
Or
best
the right
way.
way? Yeah,
No, not at all.
exactly.
I tell this
Yeah.
hilarious story. Well, I think it's hilarious. My mother laughs too, about my desire to ice skate when I was a child. Like I said, growing up in San Diego, California, I had access
Yeah,
to
that's weird.
so many different things. Right, you don't think about ice skating in Southern California,
Not in
right?
San Diego.
No.
Oh, in
In
Minnesota, yes, we
yes,
hockey and ice skating all the time.
right.
San Diego,
Canada,
not so much.
Canadian
Yeah.
children grow up, on skates, right? They're born on skates.
Yep, exactly.
That's what all my Canadian friends say anyway. But
Yeah, it's
I
a stereotype,
really,
but it's true.
it kind of is, yeah. But when my mother tells this story about how I was like maybe 3 years old and begging her to go ice skating, and she says she took me ice skating. I was young enough, I don't even remember. But she
Yeah,
said one lesson, one session, and she decided she did not move to Southern California to spend her days in a freezing cold ice rink. She said, let's go to the beach. Okay. And don't get me wrong, I love the beach. I live for the beach. I am at home on the beach anywhere in the world. But I
right,
really wanted to skate. For my mother, though, it was not a priority. That's not where we were supposed to spend our time. It was not important. And besides, what are you going to do with that in life, right?
right,
Little did my
right.
mother know that years later, when I packed up and moved to New York to go to school, and I had access to an ice skating rink and the time and the desire, I was determined to learn how to skate. And I
Yeah,
did. And I continued. I didn't even get a chance to connect with a real coach and take actual like private ice skating lessons until I was 23 years old. Which
wow.
in ice skating terms, that's ancient, that's over the hill, that's way beyond when you can ever learn anything meaningful, right? But
Yeah,
I
well,
was
you're not going to be a competitor,
wrong.
but you're going to
I
enjoy it.
I
Oh,
did
oh, you
compete.
competed.
I compete.
Ah,
Not only did I
wow.
compete, I also continued my studies and I became a professional figure skating coach. And I have
Wow.
worked in several places coaching figure skating. In Who would have thought that this young black girl from Southern California was going to be teaching ice skating in Japan? That was one of our
Yeah.
regular activities at our school. We took all the children ice skating. And we were living in Nagano Prefecture where they hosted the Winter Olympics. So we got to go skating at one of the facilities where they held the Olympic speed skating events.
No
It
way.
was awesome.
Oh,
But
that's
my
fantastic.
mother could never have predicted that. It was
No.
only me prioritizing what I was passionate about and taking it to what ended up being a natural conclusion for me because I was finally in a place as an adult to pursue what I was interested in studying. And everybody and their brother told me, but that's not possible. You can't do that. And I'm here to say
Right.
that when you have the kind of childlike enthusiasm with which I tackled ice skating as an adult, the sky is the limit. And that's true,
Yeah.
I honestly and fervently believe, with whatever it is you're talking about, whatever it is people are truly, truly passionate about. I learned about this digital nomad path in the same kind of way. And my husband and
Yeah.
I have been diligently and passionately pursuing the things that are a fascination to us. And that's how we make our living. And that's what we're teaching our child. Not that you have to go to school first and study what somebody else decides is important, and then maybe eventually you can figure out what you want to do. But who are you? What is it that you want to contribute to the world? And how is it that you'd like to go about making that happen? And then let's figure that out. Because as you mentioned,
Yeah.
school as we know it is from a previous era. That does not, it was not
Yeah.
created for the world in which we live today. And the world is changing at such a rapid pace that 2 decades from now, who knows what the world is going to look like? Why would we choose
Yeah.
to use the tools of antiquity to prepare for a future that doesn't yet exist? Why not embrace what's happening right now to live our lives as if school didn't even exist in the first place? Because we're having so much fun doing it, I can tell you. And the learning, like I said, you can't stop this kind of learning. And it's true whether it's something
No.
academic or sports related or hobby or professions or travel or it's life. This is what we were created to do, to explore our
That is
curiosity and
one
share it.
100%. That is the way, in my opinion, that life should be lived. We should not, we should be pursuing those things that fire up our childish passions. We
Yes.
should be actively engaging in those things. And too many people, far too many people just put all of those things on the back burner and they get stuck in this life that they don't necessarily want, they don't necessarily like, does not inspire them in any way, shape, or form, but they're doing it because they're supposed to, or that's what's expected. And that's really what this podcast is all about. Because if people have that that passion, that childish excitement of exploring and traveling and seeing new things and experiencing different things, then you need to do that.
Yes. It's
That
amazing
is
what
it.
happens when you do that. Because as you said,
Yeah.
it attracts other people who want to do
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
And
1000%.
yes, yes, a hundred
I would
thousand.
live life. You know what? 100,000%. I think if we could put the podcast in that last 5 minutes and it would be perfect.
That's it. That's it.
That is it. That is the key. That's the secret to living life
Yeah,
right there.
live it.
As I truly believe. Exactly. Live it. Well, you know what? We're going to wrap this up because I don't think it can top what you just said. So, how can people find you? I'm gonna put your contact information in the notes, but where can people find you and reach out?
So my website is Our Kitchen Classroom, and you can find me there across the socials. Karen M. Ricks. You can search for the hashtag Our Kitchen Classroom. Play with your food. So many different things. I'll be sure to share
Uh,
all
I'm,
the links.
I'm a little hesitant to go searching the play with your food hashtag, to be honest, but I'll give it a shot.
It's fun, I promise you. And you'll learn so much more that you didn't think was possible with food, too. I'm talking
Mm.
gorgeous deliciousness. Oh, it's a good time.
And I'm hungry now. I'm hungry now. Well, Karen, thank you so much for coming on. I do appreciate your time and what you
Thank
brought to
you.
the. That's amazing. Thank
Thank
you
you for
so
having
much.
me. Thank you for having this podcast, for continuing to share this amazing message with more people in the world. And I hope that we can continue to help change mindsets and set people free so that they can live the lives that they enjoy living.
Yeah, that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, my pleasure. And make sure to subscribe, follow, comment. If you want to know anything in particular, leave it in the comments below, and I will find a guest that will answer your questions.